In 103 BC, a man called Spartacus was born in the then independent region of Thrace in modern-day Bulgaria, and he's described as being of nomadic stock. According to some sources, he served as a Thracian mercenary and a Roman soldier, and at some point he deserted the legions, becoming a brigand, before being recaptured and sold into slavery. Spartacus was brought by a gladiator school in Capua, where he practiced the Thracian style of combat, a possible reason for his birth being attributed to Thrace. And around the age of 30, he began to organise 200 slaves and gladiators in a conspiracy to escape. However, in 73 BC there was a whistleblower on the plan, and with his masters closing in to nip this escape in the bud, Spartacus and 70 of his fellow gladiators, mostly Gauls and Thracians, armed themselves with kitchen knives and fought their way out of the city. They fought off their wardens and a force of pursuers outside the city, acquiring more professional gear from these men, before beginning to pillage the wealthy countryside surrounding the city. Where there was wealth in the Roman Republic, there were slaves, and these were more than happy to join the brigands in looting their master's property, and as such the gladiators' numbers swelled into the thousands. The slave army began to march to Mount Vesuvius, and although the higher-ups in Rome didn't realise it at the time, the Third Servile War had begun.
Today's subject: slavery.
The First and Second Servile Wars, I will add, had been contained exclusively to Sicily, following its bad treatment after its capture from Carthage. And the Gallic gladiator Crixus was Spartacus' fellow commander as the force reached the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. But word of a Roman militia heading their way reached the slaves, and they prepared for a siege. The legions weren't coming. They were busy in Spain and Asia. So Claudius Globa was sent by the praetor Publius Varinius, who had been entrusted with this minor mopping up operation, and he and his hastily assembled militia began the siege. Plutarch would state that there was only one way up the hill. The gladiators were trapped. However, the top of the hill was covered with wild vines, and the gladiators constructed ladders out of these, and they quietly descended down to the other side of the hill. So whilst Globa slept, imagining himself receiving a consulship after crushing the revolt, he and his men were slaughtered. And following this, the gladiators' numbers swelled with local opportunistic herdsmen, defeating Varinius' forces in the early battles of the campaign. And due to his skills as a tactician, the claim that Spartacus had military experience is supported. The slaves' numbers swelled to 70,000, and the gladiators were free to roam, plunder, and ravage throughout Campania and Luciana, despite Spartacus' unsuccessful attempts to restrain their savagery. And the trained gladiators trained the troops in combat over the winter of 73 to 72 BC, arming them with weapons and armour they had captured, and these men would in turn train men themselves, and due to this exponential system, the slave army became a well-trained, formidable force. But seeing no hope of victory against the inexhaustible reserves of manpower that the Roman Republic possessed, Spartacus and his followers prepared to move northwards and cross the Alps to freedom. However, his colleague Crixus hadn't had his fill yet, and took the Gaulish and German gladiators and continued to plunder the Italian countryside, while Spartacus made a run for freedom. He would winter near Furi, where vagabonds and escaped or liberated slaves joined his ranks. They even gathered enough horses to form a cavalry unit. But the next year the Senate dispatched 4 legions to destroy the slave revolt before it got truly out of hand. The consuls Gellius and Clodianus destroyed Crixus' force of 30,000 at Mount Garganus, and killed him before turning on Spartacus on the high ground at Picenum. According to Appius, with legions closing in from both directions, Spartacus pressed the attack before the forces could combine, destroying both armies in detail, and then once more as they regrouped. Plutarch's account contains less dramatic victories, but either way Spartacus was victorious, and they had successfully fought their way to the Alps, and the road out of Italy was safe, forcing 300 prisoners to fight each other to the death in a mockery of the gladiatorial combat which he had been subjected to. Spartacus considered attacking Rome itself. But after dismissing this as unrealistic, you would have thought that the slave army would have left Italy for good. But maybe he lost control of his men, we'll never know. But after defeating the governor of Cisalpine Gaul, the slave army began to move south. Back in Rome, Marcus Licinius Crassus, the man who had gone to join Pompey and Caesar in the First Triumvirate, had just been made praetor and given 8 legions, numbering around 50,000 well-trained Roman soldiers to quell the revolt. Hoping this campaign would be the making of him, Crassus was unwilling to take any chances, bringing back the process of decimation in order to get his soldiers to both fear and despise him as they pursued the slaves. Spartacus continued to march south, What he was planning is a mystery, but he attempted to negotiate crossing for his army to Sicily from some pirates. He made the mistake of paying them up front, and unsurprisingly, being pirates, they took the money and ran, leaving Spartacus and his army trapped in the toe of Italy by Crassus by the end of 71 BC. Crassus constructed 37 miles of fortifications to prevent their escape from their camp at Rhegium on the Strait of Messana. He tried to negotiate, but the glory-hungry Crassus would have none of it, so the slaves were forced to focus all of their forces in one part of the line. And before the battle, Spartacus killed his horse, stating that if they won, he'd have plenty to choose from, but if they lost, he'd have no need for it. The slaves broke through the Roman lines at the cost of 15,000 men, but this caused discipline to break down, and Spartacus could tell that he would not have an army for much longer, so turned to fight the Romans in a string of battles, culminating in his defeat at the Selle River. Supposedly, Spartacus fought his way all the way to Crassus, killing 2 centurions before being cut down himself, and casualty figures range from 5 to 60,000 as they tend to do with ancient sources. Crassus would crucify 6,000 of the prisoners along the Appian Way, all the way from Rome to Capua, and should have been the sole hero of the story in the Roman eye. However, the young rockstar general Pompey Magnus managed to intercept 5,000 survivors from the battle while marching south, on his way from Spain to aid Crassus. And he had his legions slaughter these men, and being a PR master, he quickly sent word to Rome that he, Pompey Magnus, had defeated the slave revolt.
This whole thing, all of this, it's all about me.
We stand here amidst my achievement, not yours!
And before Crassus could say otherwise, the two men were sharing credit for the victory, and even sharing a consulship. They had mutually decided that it was in both of their best interests to defeat their shared political opponents before eventually turning on each other for the supremacy of the Roman Republic. But neither of them knew that some obscure nobleman called Gaius Julius Caesar would defeat them both at this. So 10 legions had been required to defeat the slaves in the Third Servile War, and Spartacus is remembered as a Marxist hero in a way. And with his death at the Battle of the Selle River, so perished the heroic gladiator, who had moulded herdsmen, brigands and outcasts into a victorious army, supplied them with weapons and equipment, contrived during 2 years to feed and keep them together, done all that a man could do to protect the innocent from their lust and vengeance, 9 times defeated the Roman armies, and compelled the Roman government to put forward their whole available power in order to subdue him. Thanks for watching.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
And I'm Kanye West.
That's a nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is...